Greetings to you all, my friends, in peace. This week's Holy Trinity Bible study will take a look at the disciples' encounter with Jesus on the road to Emmaus. This is just my opinion, but if you were to ask me to save only one chapter in the entire Bible, I would probably choose the 24th chapter of Luke. And here's why. This chapter gives us everything that we need to know about discipleship and just about everything we need to know about Jesus. Why do I say that? Stay with us and we'll explore it together along with some examples from art in the history of Christianity. Most of you are already familiar with the story. A pair of crestfallen disciples are walking away from Jerusalem on Easter Sunday, and they encounter a stranger, and they have a conversation, and they share a meal, and they recognize Jesus in the breaking of the bread, and he vanishes from their sight. This story has been a favorite of iconographers and painters, and here even by a sculptor. What do you notice in this ivory relief found in a German church that goes back 10 centuries? Remember that the Christian tradition isn't just about art as photographs or single events, but it's supposed to communicate theological and spiritual meaning. What do you make of this Orthodox icon from a Serbian monastery? And this work of art goes back about 6 centuries. The iconographer presents 3 episodes from Easter Sunday: Peter in the empty tomb, the 2 disciples encountering Jesus on the walk to Emmaus, and then the supper in the village. A different iconographer presents the essence of Luke 24, 13 to 35, the disciples and Jesus on the road, the disciples and Jesus at supper, and then the disciples returning to Jerusalem to spread the word. What else do you notice in this image? The Christian tradition is less interested in the Bible as individual stories. The Gospels especially, and the resurrection stories in particular, are intended to be a single narrative. Details are always important, the ones artists intentionally place in the images, as well as what you find in your observation. It's a tradition in Eastern iconography that one of the disciples on the road to Emmaus was Luke. Otherwise, how would he have known the story? As always, if you want a closer or longer look at these images, press pause on your computer or your television remote. You might be surprised to know that we're not quite sure where Emmaus was or is. We can make some guesses. Bible maps, such as the one here, on the left, you see the bigger picture, Sea of Galilee at the top. You'll notice familiar names and the towns, Jerusalem toward the bottom. And then on the right, a little bit of a blow up, you can see Jerusalem, the familiar towns of Bethany and Bethlehem, and Emmaus is thought to be some miles toward the west. Having set the stage with a few images and with a map, let's get to our narrative. That very day, the first day of the week, 2 of Jesus' disciples were going to a village 7 miles from Jerusalem called Emmaus. And they were conversing about all the things that had occurred. And it happened that while they were conversing and debating, Jesus himself drew near and walked with them, but their eyes were prevented from recognizing him. He asked them, "What are you discussing as you walk along?" The scripture scholar Loretta Dornish mentions something about the Greek language here. The idea about this conversation is something along the lines of throwing words back and forth, kind of like a debate between a philosopher and students. They stopped, looking downcast. One of them, named Cleopas, said to him in reply, "Are you the only visitor to Jerusalem who does not know of the things that have taken place there in these days?" And he replied to them, "What sort of things?" And here we see Jesus, the rabbi, eliciting something from the brains via the tongues of his disciples. And now we have the disciples giving the Lord a summary of what they know about him. Let's read this. They said to him, "The things that happened to Jesus the Nazarene, who is a prophet, mighty in deed and word before God and all the people, and how our chief priests and rulers both handed him over to a sentence of death and crucified him. But we were hoping that he would be the one to redeem Israel. And besides all this, it is now the 3rd day since this took place." Some women from our group, however, have astounded us. They were at the tomb early in the morning and did not find his body. They came back and reported that they had indeed seen a vision of angels who announced that he was alive. Then some of those with us went to the tomb and found things just as the women had described, but him they did not see. Practically any Christian of any time could recite this narrative. We take it from the witness of the early disciples. Who was Jesus? Well, he was a prophet. We know where he came from. We know who persecuted him, and we know that he was put to death because he alarmed and excited the authorities. This discussion, this teaching moment on the road to Emmaus, is a very popular topic in Christian art, not just in icons, but also for the more realistic painters and artists in the Western tradition. This is probably one of the most popular paintings of the account on the road to Emmaus. What do you notice from the Swiss painter Bremerton? You might have guessed that Mr. Zund was a well-known landscape painter. Jesus and the disciples are part of a bigger picture here. What does that mean for us as a Christian? An older painting here from Harry Met a painter who was active in what is now Belgium. You'll notice the crosses in the center of the painting, Jesus and the disciples in the lower left. What else do you notice here? Not just a snapshot moment, but a deeper theological meaning here. The next image is a marvelous work by Michael Torvel. This is on fabric. This is a banner, one of a series that is in a church in New Jersey. What do you notice here? You may have heard in religious circles the term Paschal mystery. In essence, we're talking of the passion, death, and resurrection of the Lord when we speak of the Paschal mystery. And many artists present much of the Paschal mystery in their work as Mr. Torvel does. We can also zoom in closer. Maybe we're drawn to the people in an image and the relationship expressed there. And maybe that tells us something of our own relationship with the Lord Jesus. Looking more closely at Jesus and the disciples, what do you notice in this part of Mr. Torvel's image? The image on the right is from the Exodus narrative, Moses drawing water from the rock for the thirsty Israelites. Let's return to our narrative and see what Jesus has to say. And he said to them, "Oh, how foolish you are! How slow of heart to believe all that the prophets spoke! Was it not necessary that the Christ should suffer these things and enter into his glory? Then, beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he interpreted to them what referred to him in all the scriptures. And Jesus taught this in his very witness and ministry, didn't he? Take up your cross daily and follow me. The cross precedes the glory. As they approached the village to which they were going, he gave the impression that he was going on farther, but they urged him, "Stay with us, for it is nearly evening, and the day is almost over." So he went in to stay with them. We've seen the works of this early Italian painter before in the series. What do you notice in this image? Another lovely landscape here by the German painter Fritz von Hude. The sun setting in the west and the three companions on the road. What do you notice here? The image of Jesus at table with the two companions, very popular for church interiors and artwork associated with altars where Christians celebrate the Eucharist. What do you notice in this church image? Wherever you are, think of your church. Would you find solace and fruitfulness in an image of Emmaus in your parish church? Here's a painting by the Dutch master Rembrandt van Rijn. What do you notice here? Let's complete our narrative and then we'll attend to two last images for this Bible study. And it happened that while he was with them at table, he took bread, said the blessing, broke it, and gave it to them. With that, their eyes were opened and they recognized him, but he vanished from their sight. And then they said to each other, "Were not our hearts burning within us while he spoke to us on the way and opened the scriptures to us. So they set out at once and returned to Jerusalem, where they found gathered together the 11 and those with them who were saying, "The Lord has truly been raised and has appeared to Simon." Then the two recounted what had taken place on the way and how he was made known to them in the breaking of the bread. The connection with the Christian Eucharist is obvious. When you read the breaking of the bread in Luke's Gospel, or especially in the Acts of the Apostles, this is St. Luke's code word for the celebration of the Eucharist. One last icon for our presentation today, this from an American iconographer from Texas. What do you notice in this image? And this amazing triptych from another church in our archdiocese. Scripture scholars suppose, but they don't know, that the companion of Cleopas, who goes unnamed in the Gospel, could be anybody. We can easily place ourselves in the narrative. Modern commentators and artists often place a woman as the companion of Cleopas, as this artist does, presumably Cleopas's wife. The debate about who it was or who it could be is less interesting to me than the notion of discipleship, because I think that Luke, in this narrative, illustrates what it means for the Christian to be a disciple. Think about it this way. We come to know Jesus through facts that we read in the Bible or what people tell us about him. We encounter Jesus, though we don't always recognize him when he is with us. And as Catholics, our sacramental experience deepens our relationship with him and somehow helps us to find him more truly, more lovingly, more deeply in our lives. This is all given for Catholics. But notice the immediate reaction of the disciples here. They have encountered their Lord in the breaking of the bread. And though they have settled in at an inn or a restaurant, presumably for the night, they immediately feel the urge and impulse to go out, to return to others, and to tell people what their experience was. And this is the essence of discipleship. Not telling people about Jesus, not telling facts about what we've seen and read in the Bible, but relating our personal experiences with the person of Jesus. This is why Luke's Gospel, 24th chapter, is so important, not just to Catholics, but to any Christian. Hopefully, through reflection on these works of art and on this story, we'll come to know Jesus more deeply and will begin to feed the fire inside so that when we return from social distancing, we'll be prepared to go out and imitate the disciples who encountered their Lord on the road to Emmaus.